Right, look at that. That's 30 quid, that's off now, 30 quid in any restaurant. Apricot soy glazed pork cutlet with saffron polenta. Howdy. Right, get our pans on, preheating, and so what we're making is, one second. Right, I've done a lot of getting everything ready beforehand because this is the sort of video that could potentially get a bit long, so I've done all the prep work first. But I'm going to make, got a lovely pork cutlet here, bone in. It'll work just as well with a pork chop, which is actually what I wanted to do, but I couldn't find a decent looking pork chop. So I'm going to do pork cutlet in a sticky apricot jam and soy glaze. And then once we've glazed the pork chop, we're going to then turn that glaze, reduce it down. We're not going to reduce it down, it's already reduced down. We're going to let it down with some liquids, cider and the stock, and then make a nice sauce. And then we're going to serve that with polenta with it's going to be a saffron polenta. I'm doing this for one. In the description, I'm going to do all of the ingredients for two. So if I do miss anything out, don't forget anything I say here, you got the double if you're doing it for more than one. If I lose track of anything, or if you lose track of anything, I'm going to put all of the ingredients down below. Which I try to do anyway, but sometimes I do forget. First thing I'm going to get on the go is our polenta. So I've got a saucepan here. Polenta's not hard. People think it is, it's not. So medium-low heat on that saucepan. I'm going to go in with our, this is chicken stock. With polenta you want, get that saffron out as well. So 1 part saffron to 4 parts liquid. So if you're using water, stock, milk, I've got 70 grams, which is slightly more than a single portion, but I'm not adding anything else. 70 grams of polenta, 280 ml of stock, and I've just steeped that saffron in that stock. It's just stock, cube stock. We're adding so many other flavours, that'll be fine. If you've got your own homemade stock, use that instead, if you want. So just gonna bring that up to almost a boil, go in with our polenta, and just whisk it in. Now a lot of people think you have to constantly whisk this and stir polenta. You don't. Once it's started to, once you know you've not got any lumps in there and it's all okie dokie like that, it's fine. I am going to give it a few cracks of black pepper and a pinch of salt. And then we're just going to give it, keep whisking it until it will start to become almost like a wallpaper paste, which I know doesn't sound particularly appetising, but trust me, it'll be nice. So while that's on the side there, go up to our pork cutlet. So because we're gonna sear it in the pan like we would normally, then we're gonna make our glaze, put it back in the pan and glaze it, and then take it out of the pan and make our sauce. This is a decently thick one, but we still run the risk of overcooking it a little bit because we're gonna be cooking it a couple of times almost. So what I've done is I've brined it. Now brining is essentially means, it's almost like marinating it in salt. So I've had that in some Tupperware. I only needed just enough, you need enough water to cover it. So I had 500 ml of water was enough. And to that I just added a tablespoon of salt. What it does though is, I can't remember the science, the salt draws moisture into the pork and it helps it hold on to that moisture. So it's really good for meats that have a tendency, turn that down, we don't want to boil it, has a tendency to dry out when you're cooking them. So it's great for chicken. It's good for fish, turkey. You can brine an entire turkey or an entire chicken, and it makes for a really good, tasty. It draws, it seasons the meat the whole way through, but it also really helps keep it moist. So we're just going to keep an eye on that, give it a little stir every now and again. I've brined this only for a couple of hours, 2-3 hours. Got it out and I've dried it off on a paper towel because we're going to now sear it. I got it out of that about half hour ago. Same sort of thing as with any other meat that you want to sear. You don't want it cold, fridge cold, when it goes into the pan. So I put it in the brine in the fridge. I also chucked in a couple of juniper couple of juniper berries and some crushed black peppercorns and some crushed pink peppercorns. I'm trying to multitask here and it's not going so well. Right, so that's our polenta pretty much done. I'm just going to let that cook through a little bit, make sure it doesn't start to burn. So in our pan, first of all, we're going to go medium-high heat, some vegetable oil, and we're going to just sear the outside of this steak, cutlet. We'll probably have to put the extractors up on high because I want to get a decent sear on this, and we're going to take it out. So I might jump to it being cooked. Well, not cooked, but seared, because it's going to get a bit noisy. And then we can make our glaze. Plate ready to bring it out onto. Once that oil's preheated, not going to go crazy with the salt because like I have said, I have brined this. A bit of pepper as well. I'm just going to get a good sear on that. So I'll probably cut to this being done because I'm going to have to put the extractors on because it's going to go smoky as hell. Pan off the heat for now because we want it to cool down a little bit. Seared both sides of the pork. I've also, this has got a ring of fat around the side, a bit of a fat cap. So I've made sure I've seared all of that as well, rendered some of that fat down. And chuck that on a plate, let it kind of rest for a little bit. We are going to drain off most of this fat because we don't need it. Don't put fat down the sink. Right, so now, get me some cooking implement. We're going to deglaze this pan with a splash of dry cider. Not loads. And just we're going to scrape up that fond off the bottom of that pan because fond equals flavour. And I'm going to switch to something because I need something to scrape the bottom of that pan with. But this is a nightmare to wash up with bamboo, so I'm going to switch to my favourite. Here is my favourite. Oh, I've already got it out. Spatula. I'm going to put that back on the heat and we're going to go in there with half of, you know, those longish finished shallots. I'm only using half, like I said, double or treble, quadruple, depending on how many people you feed in. And then we're just going to swip that shallot and reduce the cider down. And we're also going to go in with our apricot and soy glaze. So there's 2 tablespoons of apricot jam, preserve, whatever you want to call it, and a tablespoon and a half of soy sauce, and a couple of splashes of fish sauce just to bring some funk to the party. Move this fat out of the way because it's screeching hot. And now we're just going to let all of this cook off, let the alcohol cook off, and we're going to let everything reduce down and get really nice and sticky. Because there's sugar in that soy sauce that we're going to want to get down, but also the apricot jam is going to get all really nice and sticky. You only want to do it at a low heat, you don't want to burn any of that sugar. And then when we've got a bit more of a syrupy sort of consistency, we're going to put our pork chop back in there, get it nicely coated. I'm going to break down any chunks of jam. They may well just be chunks of apricot. We're going to get that all lovely and sticky and marinated in that. Finish cooking it through because it's still, I don't mind my pork, especially when it's good quality pork that I've got from a butcher's. Don't want it being a bit rosy on the inside, but I don't want raw. You can't have a rare pork chop. I keep calling it pork chop, it's a bone-in pork cutlet. They're slightly different areas of the pig. It's a little bit less fatty. But yeah, so let this all reduce down a little bit. Right, so once you've got to a point where you can drag your spoon through and it leaves a trail, we're going to go back in with our pork chop, as well as any residual resting juices. These are slightly raw, so don't reuse this plate because those juices might have run out of a part of the pork chop that was still a bit raw. So we're not going to reuse that plate. Food safety. And then all we're going to do is find somewhere to put our spatula in. I'm just going to make a mess. Get a spoon. I'm just going to baste our glaze over that pork chop, and we're just going to, on low heat, finish this cooking. I'm going to want to flip it regularly as well, just so that you don't just end up with one side all nice and basted and caramelised. If you've never basted in a pan before, tilt your handle down ever so slightly and it will pull to one side, and you can just, with your spoon, like that. All those sugars have gone nice and dark and caramelised. That soy sauce, add in a nice savoury sweet note, not sweet note, there's some sweetness to soy sauce, savoury salty note. Should be getting almost like a super reduced syrup to it now. Look at this sticky, lovely glaze. Salty, sweet umami. On there, we are going to go with our lovely golden yellow saffron polenta. Make a nice little bed for our pork chop. Cutlet, you know what I mean. Glazed pork chop, which is going to sit on there. And it's going to rest on that bed of polenta while we make our sauce. I'm going to go in with another little splash of cider. And 200 ml of chicken stock. And we're going to get all that caramelised goodness up off the bottom of that pan. And put the spurs to this. I'm going to boil that up a little bit and reduce it right down and make ourselves a nice pan sauce jus. Sort of. We're not going to thicken it. I mean, you could add a little flour or cornstarch slurry in there if you wanted to make it have a lot of body. But what we're going to do is use that butter from the fridge, which I've cubed up. Once it's reduced down a little bit, we're going to mount the sauce, which is a technical term for melting butter into the sauce, which makes it glossy and gives it some body. So I'm going to bring this up to a simmer. Make sure you've got anything that was part of that glaze up off the bottom of that pan and sort of melted in, because we don't want that to burn on the bottom of the pan, because burnt sugar is much like anything, not good. Well, much like anything that's burnt, not good. Reduce it down by about half. If you worry about this getting cold, you can stick it in a warm oven. Okay. So, that 5 minutes, we've reduced by half and pull our spatula back through it again. Lower that heat right down. Barely any heat in there. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add these cubes of butter in one by one. Now, fancy chefs will tell you should never stir the butter in. You should swirl the pan to melt it in. And I've never known why. Don't know why. Unsalted butter. Salted butter is for your toast. Unsalted butter is for cooking. Another one. So you might have realised by now this isn't a ridiculously healthy meal. It's not too bad, but you know, treat yourself. Why not? And you should be able to see that it will start going a bit clearer. Not clearer, the opposite of clearer. It will get a bit more velvety and unctuous, and get some body to it. That's just the fats in that butter and the milk solids coming apart but integrating into the sauce. It's just going to make a nice, rich. It's by no means going to be a thick gravy. This is a saucy jus almost, but we've got that really rich, thick glaze on that pork chop already, so we don't really need like a really thick, heavy sauce as well. Give it one last stir. Make sure there's nothing clinging to the bottom of the pan. There shouldn't be, because you should have already made sure you got all that up. And now we're just gonna. You've probably got more sauce than you're gonna need, but who are we to judge? I'm just gonna over the top of that like that. Go for as much or as little as you want. Right. Look at that. That's 30 quid. That's off now. 30 quid in any restaurant. Apricot soy glazed pork cutlet with saffron polenta. You can use cheaper meat than this. Just go any pork, steak or anything like that. My ethos, is that the right word? I don't eat meat very often, but when I do, I'll go to a proper butcher's or go online and get really good quality meat. Treat yourself. Spend a bit more money on your meat and eat it less often. That sauce is to die for. Make that sauce on its own. That glaze will work with anything. I just really like it. Apricot and pork with a bit of cider works lovely. And soy is just, yeah. So yeah, this is my dinner. I'm going to go eat it. Enjoy the rest of my cider. But this is beautiful. It really is. That polenta on its own will go with loads of other things. The pork chop, if you don't like polenta, have it with some mash or some chips. Or even a salad. But yeah. We're at that time of the video. Like, comment and subscribe. Ring the bell, follow me on Instagram. And see you when I see you, I guess. Be good. If you can't be good, be lucky. Been a while since I said that. Wish I hadn't now. But yeah, I'll see you when I see you. Ooh.